Okay, training volume. There's a lot of different ways we measure training volume. Commonly, we think of training volume in terms of things like number of reps lifted, how far we ran, elevation gain, total tonnage lifted, and that's where we would multiply, the amount of weight we lifted by the number of reps we did it for. There's a lot of different ways we use to measure training volume, and all of these are simply a way that we can kind of gauge the amount of training stress that exists within the program. So within the context of a training program, whenever we take these absolute measures of training volume, it only works as a programming tool whenever we have some system where everything is very consistent and we're able to compare training volumes from one athlete to another, or whenever we make changes to training volume in order to allow for recovery or to push the training stress up a little bit higher. But in general, this has to occur within the context of training at different intensities. So if we do, say, 50 total reps during a workout with 30% of our 1 rep max, that's a much different amount of training stress than attempting to do 50 reps at 70% of our 1 rep max. Likewise, we can say the same thing about running mileage. Running 10 slow miles is going to be a lot different than trying to run 10 fast miles, where we have to break up that 10-mile interval into segments of 1 or 2 miles at a time, and we're running at a much faster pace. Doing 100 jumps in a workout is going to be a lot different if we're jumping near our maximal capacity on every jump versus doing a lot of jumps where we're not jumping very high or we're not putting a lot of effort into each jump. So the main thing to consider with training volume is it's always going to be very dependent upon training intensity. And within the context of a program, volume and intensity are always going to have an inverse relationship with one another. So whenever we're trying to do really high volume sets, really high volume training sessions, very high volume programs, then that has to come at the expense of intensity. And whenever we want to push the intensity up really high, especially during those periods where we're peaking or getting ready for some kind of competition, then we have to allow volume to decrease to facilitate the higher training intensity that we're going to be performing. Oftentimes, when we try to push volume and intensity up at the same time, that almost always leads to overtraining injuries, assuming that the training stress of the program is adequate enough. Typically speaking, whenever we attempt to push volume and intensity up simultaneously and we radically increase the training stress of the program, that's where we start running into a lot of our training injuries. So with all that being said, just keep in mind that volume and intensity are always going to be linked within the program. So whenever we make changes to our program based on the amount of volume we're performing, then generally in those cases we have to fix intensity. So in general, just always remember that the manipulation of volume and intensity is going to be the primary two means by which we adjust the training stress of the program. And that when we're looking at how stressful a training program is, we always need those two pieces of information. We always need the intensity that we're performing at, and we also need to know what the volume at those specific intensities are. And then through that, we can start to gauge how stressful the training program is, how effective it might become, and we can also get a ballpark idea for how much risk may exist within the context of the program. So that's a quick rundown on volume. We're going to move into ways that we can start to measure training stress in the next video, and we'll see you then.